my powers, I will show you where they grow. You like the wind, I'll tell you where it blows. Clean as you go, clean as you go, clean as you go, yeah. You need my energy, I'll show you where to go. You want the rivers, let me show you where they flow. Clean as you go, clean as you go, clean as you go. You want the highest building in your town. Where's my trees? I don't see them around here no more. You wanna go to Mars, but the soil is full of mercury. Keep my water clean, free from PVC. How many pieces of plastic in the Tennessee River? I hope this makes you see things clearer.
Environmental Coffeehouse. I have the esteemed Dr. Simon Michaux with me today, and I had told all of you when I did the community post about heat sources that we were going to do a show on it, and hence we are doing a show on it. And what better person than Simon, who is an expert on heating sources. He is a geometallurgist. He understands minerals and all. It's my second time having him. So welcome, Simon. I'm thrilled to have you.
Hi, Sandy. We had such fun last time.
We did. We're going to have more fun this time. I know it. So we'll start out with weather. I checked your weather. Are you under a storm watch?
I don't really care. The weather fluctuates up and down. Like it can be minus 30 outside, and inside the house stays at a steady 23 degrees Celsius.
All right.
And it never changes. So I don't even notice when it drops 20 degrees outside.
Well, this is going to be interesting because I sure as hell notice. And heating sources for the future because we live in cold climates.
Yep.
Right?
And you've also touched on a problem that is not that very well understood yet, but it's coming.
Well, tell us. What's coming?
So, this morning I went out to check the mail and there was about, 3 feet of snow. And that's come in since yesterday. So I had to shovel the path. So, but that was the first time I noticed anything was different. Look, here in Finland, every house is engineered for the cold. And it's seen as not just like you don't just have just a heating unit, you've got a whole system. And that they, for example, have like a heating unit that will heat a whole neighborhood, and it'll pump hot water everywhere. And that hot water going in, like, how do you get drinking water into the house and sewage and grey water out of the house without it freezing? And so the heating circuits to heat everyone's houses also heat the pipes to actually go out. So the whole thing is designed as a system.
I like.
And everything's triple glazed, like there's 3 layers of glass. There is insulation everywhere, and it's to the point where it can be minus 30 degrees and I'm sitting there in my underwear drinking beer looking out the window. That's
cool.
Yeah, so here in Finland, 75% of the nation is pristine forest and lakes, right? And so a lot of that is managed forest, and so they've got a massive paper industry or forestry industry, and that is how they're actually doing a lot of their heating. Not all. There was some gas, there was some coal, but they had this in the center of Helsinki. They had this massive pile of coal in the center of town, and the reason they do that is they'd use that to generate electricity in winter, and the waste heat would heat like a big section of Helsinki Central.
Wow.
So I was saying is the way the Finns have done it is they've thought about this and they've engineered the whole city as a system. And so not one house, not one group is there on its own. Uh,
How
um,
smart.
until you actually sort of get out of the central cities, and then you've got like standalone houses, and they've got some pretty strong ideas about how to do things, and the law insists that it's done properly. They won't let you build anything without sort of having all the layers of complexity that in Australia just don't exist because they don't have to.
And
So it's
here in the United States, we are so piecemeal on everything. And that's where we're going today with the screen share. Uh, I'm going to show, and we're going to talk about this because everybody on my channel understands that I was doing a question to all of them. But first, let's just show your LinkedIn page so everybody really knows who you are. Simon, geometallurgy analyst, specialist communication, flotation, circulation, economy, associate research. And everybody, if you want to, you can find Simon's LinkedIn. In another thing, I'm just going to show really quick, and then we're going to go back to this. But for our audience, this was the question, and this is why you're here with me. What do you think is the optimal way of heating? And you've just explained some of it. A wood stove, and what I had shown was my own place, a wood stove with a cat converter combustor where the wood comes from my friend's property that he's been tending for 50 more years.
Mhm.
And then, or an electric heater that the electric comes from hydropower, which is Niagara Falls, and supposedly is carbon free because that's what the paper says when they mail us the paper that that tells us the breakdown on our energy. Or a traditional propane furnace where I live is trucked into the property. Oh, it said tucked in, trucked in, and then we got a lot of comments. So we're gonna do that. So Simon, we talk about the local heat issue
Mhm.
and what my followers had said in response to the the question that I said. Okay, what are the good heat sources for the world right now? I mean, everybody's experiencing cold in the United States, and a lot of people were very interested in this. So I'm going to pick out a couple of the comments that I think, okay, anti corporatist, heat pump. Ground source, since you live in a seasonally cold climate, can be used for peak efficiency, water heating as well. Can also use the water heater to arbitrage your diurnal energy use, like a battery. So get as big of a tank as you can reasonably accommodate. Heat pumps are theoretically up to 5 to 6 times as efficient as resistive heating. Let's go.
Right. So heat pumps are the European solution. They call them fifth generation heat pumps. You have to remember, it's not just a single unit. It's a system. The house is a system. You can put a heat pump in, sure, but what's the insulation in your house? Is it any good? If it's not, then it's not going to work. What's the plumbing like in your house? Is it any good? If it's not going to work. Right. And so there's a lot of work to do to put in the heat pump and actually get it going for efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
If any of those parts of the system are not done well, then the heat pump won't work as well as hoped. There are a lot of practicalities here that are not considered or thought through, and they do work after. Like they are a technology that works once you get organised. The thing that hasn't really sort of been thought through is the amount of electricity that they will draw. It's like having another refrigerator on your power grid.
Yeah.
So imagine if every house in the neighbourhood had a second refrigerator, and what's that going to do to the power grid? So then you've got can the power grid take it and all that. So heat pumps have their place,
Mm-hmm.
but there is no. It's like so many other things. There's no one size fits all. You might have you might be able to put one in and actually sort of use it, but there might be another system that might be more useful. If you can do a wood stove, That is something that you can control because you can control the fuel side of things. Yeah, you can control the fuel side of things, and then you can manage the heat directly.
which
And
I
there's
do.
the link between you and the environment where it all comes from is something that you can see. A heat pump is dependent on electricity. Now the electricity grid is amazingly fragile,
Yeah.
and we're about to put it under strain. Right, so a lot of things there's rolling blackouts and brownouts now all over the place.
Yeah, I had a blackout last week and I had to, well, I lost 3 hours worth of video editing. I bought a backup battery, one of those UPS, Universal Power System backup battery, which was so heavy. Oh my God. But I don't want to have that happen again. So I did that, which
Yeah,
probably a lot of people would say, well, that's, sort of
people think these
bougie.
things are happening in isolation,
Oh, they're not.
right? But people think, oh, that's just like a one thing. That's a one-off thing. That happens once in a blue moon,
Not
once a
here.
day.
We lose it 4 times a year or 5 times a year.
When I was in Mount Tambourine in Australia, the house that I moved into, called the Castellan Farm, had a generator set up outside, right, under a little sort of shelter and everything, with the thing of actually, and it was set up to be used regularly. And I
Hmm.
thought, what a great setup! And then someone pointed out that where they were in the power grid was right at the very end of the extension, and it routinely used to go down 3 or 4 times a week.
Mm,
So much so
that's
that
a
the
lot.
generators were actually engineered into the house.
Really? Oh my gosh. That's pretty
So,
wild. That's
yeah. Anyway,
wild.
so heat pumps are great, but the whole idea of the stability of the electric power grid that we've gotten used to over these years, I believe, will become more unreliable. We'll have more power spikes and more brownouts and more blackouts, and especially when we cancel. Like in Australia, they're cancelling fossil fuels without really thinking about replacement systems, and they're one unplanned shutdown of a steam turbine away from rolling blackouts across the continent because they just haven't thought these things through.
Well, that's
Uh,
degrowth right there. My
so,
goodness.
but Australia, they don't have to heat their houses to survive. So they've got the "she'll be right, mate"
Yeah.
attitude.
No,
You know,
we
the
do.
the, the, the never never payback scheme.
Well, we do. Let me read you one more. Bombus Monticola. Well, it's a difficult choice. Hobson's choice, catch 22, a logical paradise. After all, civilization is a heat engine. I don't live in the US, so I'm partially blind to the economics of your choices, which I had showed earlier, the wood stove, the electric, or the propane. I have a problem with cutting down of trees in any circumstances. There's just too many of us on the planet for this to be a serious choice on a large scale. And for me, even on a smaller, tiny scale, we have to accept the possibility that what we cut down may never actually be replaced or recover for a few reasons. Trees take relatively long time to grow, and the changing climate may make it impossible for certain species to return, and they support an ecosystem, create a carbon sink, and add fertility to soils. Is the propane a waste product of or byproduct of the refining process of oil and or petroleum? It already has been refined, so there's a bit of logic that it is less damaging than the burning of wood. Truth is, I guess they're all bad choices, so it's a case of the least worst option. And that, Sandy, has to be your choice with your own criteria. But actually, I was asking this in more of a global way. But so I thought it was a good comment. It was, if it was me, I'd go propane and be sparing as possible with it. But what do I know? No, I've changed my mind on hydropower. It's already being built, and damage to the environment is largely already done. So I'm guessing from here on in the least long-term greenhouse gas contributor. Go hydroelectric. Okay.
So, all right. So the biomass system, cutting down trees, that is correct on one point. There's not enough forests on the planet to do this for all the areas that's needed. There's just
Right.
not enough. But here in Finland, for example, you've got a massive, massive natural environment that's managed. And what they do is every summer and spring, they'll go in and they will what they call rake the forests. So they'll rake the floor up and they'll cut branches down, and then that goes into the combined heat and power
Right.
to make wood chips out of. So what you've got there is a small human system embedded in a large natural system that's quite healthy, and it's managed quite well. That is not the case anywhere else in the world I've seen. Right. So that is actually correct to say. Um, if you don't, they found this in Australia. If you don't manage, uh, your forests well, then you get a lot of dead biomass hit the floor, and then you get bushfire problems in spring and summer. Um, so the Finns have worked out the necessity of actually maintaining their forests for long-term stability. Uh, so what I'm sort of saying there is, when you do actually generate heat, use it sparingly. Do things like insulate your house really, really well, so whatever heat that you've actually got in there gets used really well. Like you're not flaring it off.
Yeah, that
Uh,
was a big one, insulation.
but also design of the house and where you put things and how you put them, and like the heat pump is used as a band-aid solution. They think they're going to whack a heat pump in every home and say that the solution's done.
Yeah.
But actually, no, it's not even close. So if you've got a propane heater, okay, that's all good and well, but access to things like propane is about to become unreliable, and also might become very expensive.
It is expensive. It's $4 a gallon almost here. And they have to
So,
truck it in
and they have to truck it in, and
my
so on.
house.
Especially now, and so there are no easy answers to this. Uh, we live very well compared to, say, a few centuries ago, where inside every home, everyone's sort of rugged up with like 3 layers of clothing, and they used to
I still do.
sleep under 5 or 6 layers of bedding, and uh, you know, we don't, yeah, but we don't seem to understand that things have sort of moved on. This is what energy is doing for us. Maybe we've got to return to a more widespread return to situations like that again. What I was saying before is, you've actually got multiple systems, and that's good, because we're moving into a period of volatility when the things that we normally depend on to work might become unreliable, but you don't know which ones. And so if you've got multiple systems that can run in parallel, and you're at the center of all of it, and you're the strongest link in the chain, and you're the flexible decision making machine, then you're going to be just fine. The people who aren't very flexible are depending on one system and not realizing how that system might become unreliable. That's when things get difficult.
I did it on purpose because I saw the writing on the wall. And of course, I thought about a heat pump as well. And then I had somebody come over and give me an estimate on geothermal. And now I'm wondering what you think of this. I don't have the paper in front of me, but I got something in the mail that says they can tap into my well, an existing well. I have a well, and create power through what I have through geothermal through the well.
Mm.
That was interesting, which I'm going to have to learn more about. Not that I'm in the market or can afford another system. I
Yeah.
can't.
Well, you're probably fine. It's the people around you who have yet to actually get to that level of stability. That's the kind of thinking that they could use. And if you don't want to be the only person where things are fine and you're surrounded by people in trouble.
Well,
You, you
where I
know,
live, there's a lot of people off grid, and there's a lot of Amish who just pretty much use either kerosene or wood,
Mhm.
and they live a lifestyle of very low carbon footprint.
So they may well be stable, and that they may well be quite resilient. And so remember, we're not moving into a permanent system of a down. We're not
Okay.
a permanent problem. We're moving into a period of volatility when the normal ways of doing things fall over, but something takes their place. But whatever that is will take time to develop. And while that time is developing, that's when we get the chaos. So see it as a window of shit.
Yeah, really. I want to read you one more on the window of shit. Let's see. A lot of people. Oh, here's an Australian. Depends on the temperature range in Australia. Probably reverse cycle on solar, wind, and batteries. In cold places with geothermal or hydro plus electric. Heat pumps are much cheaper to run if you include the entire system from mining to disposal without subsidies. Not that person's not environmental. That was interesting in Australia.
Yeah, well, there's you have to remember Australia's a mining frontier, and it's been supported by coal and gas,
Yeah.
and it still is. And so, yeah. Anyway, what would you say about that? So again, these solutions work just fine on a small scale, but if you try to scale up for the large scale population of the region, that's when difficulties start happening. And so you need to have a what is it? No situation is the same. So flexibility
Right.
required in solutions. There's no magic bullet. We've got to be smart about this. Magic solutions, hit your button. Magic solutions don't actually help us. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
magical thinking again. Uh, well, and then other person said insulating the walls by removing the cladding, adding insulation and something to mount the cladding back onto the thicker walls is expensive, but if you've got a cold attic without floorboards above the insulation between the living space and the attic, you can roll out an extra insulation layer cheaply. I want to talk about that insulation, what it's made out of, and what are your viewpoints on insulating homes?
so it's something that's not seen as like they're starting to do it in Australia now, but they didn't used to all the time. They used to make them out of say fiberglass bats. Sometimes it's a foam. Sometimes it's steel wool. Uh, what they're trying to do is actually catch little pockets of air
Mm-hmm.
in a way where the air can't move on. And so there seems to be like a rule of thumb where it's the thickness involved. The materials are one thing, and so I used to think, well, what if you had many layers of different materials? And I said, yeah, whatever,
Mm.
it's thickness. And I don't know if that's true, but that was the mentality at the time. Uh, the house has got to be designed for it. If you go to Scotland, for example, and you stay in historical houses made of stone, you've got these thick stone walls, but they're freezing as
Yeah.
you. This, like my knees are knocking together, my teeth are chattering, ah! And so just want to sort of bulldoze the house flat and build a new one. Um, but a lot understanding of what insulation is has come a long way fairly recently. Like even in the last 10 years, there've been innovations coming forward where when you actually build a house now and you use insulation, there's more understanding associated with it. That if you design certain things up front, it costs more, but over the operation of the house, it'll be easier to use,
I think
right? And
so.
we have to think in those terms.
And in the long run, definitely an investment up front makes things palatable in the long run. I believe that. I do. I do. Let me see if I have any more that are interesting that we can look at. How about this one? Life in cold regions is a challenge. This is from Rollin Switch. Heating seasons can be more than half the year. Proper design and use of solar gain can cut that by more than half. Radiant heating is the most comfortable. The wood stove provides that. However, it's not portable. Small electric radiant heaters take advantage of the low carbon footprint and allow more personal heating. They can be quickly moved to a different area where people or other animals are residing. Once a person is settled, a couple of blankets and electric heating, what we talked about, heating pad keeps one warm. So you basically said that, and the insulation is a pre-existing structure. It's expensive. He's saying everything you said, and difficult, but their measures can be taken. A layer of insulation on the roof, or if the siding is being replaced, a layer there. Often overlooked is insulating the floor above the basement. So these are all good ideas. He's a very good friend and a good a follower. What do you think of that one? And you were talking
So
about where you live, so maybe.
I'm the first person to have these ideas. So, it all comes down to money. when you're building a house,
Yeah.
you often have to do it to a budget, and a lot of the time people will do the bare minimum to get by because they just don't have the money for anything else. Also, insulation decades ago used to cost a lot more expensive than it does now, and so it was really hard to justify. Things like in Australia, because earthquakes don't happen there either. My ex-father-in-law came to visit from California, and he saw how fragile an Australian house was, because in California you get earthquakes every now and then. And he said, yeah, but in Australia you had like one set of floorboards, whereas the standard he was talking about, you had multiple layers of
Right.
floorboard that used to go in different directions. So when they were all nailed together, it would lock together as a rigid structure. But that's really expensive, like many, many times more expensive. And
Unfortunate, isn't it?
yeah, but we don't have to do that in Australia because we don't have the same challenges.
Right.
But what that also means is Australian houses generally are not insulated very well, right? So, for example, if I build a house, I like the idea of having a basement, and you can double your floor space, but you've got to dig the basement
Yeah, I
and
have one.
the drains in, which is a lot of money. Then you build the house on top of it. But you could be doubling the cost of your house,
Hmm.
but you end up with twice the floor space. Yeah, but you've got to make those choices up front.
For twice the junk
Yeah, well,
accumulation.
put more books in. My wife would love that. Um, Empty space, more books. Great.
Yeah,
So,
but books are great.
all right, what I'm reading at the moment. There you go.
Oh, the Magna Carta.
I'm for the Venus project. We're looking at. Um, we've got an opportunity of actually doing things differently. So I'm looking at things like the U.S. Constitution, Bill of Rights, and the Magna Carta, and
Good
other
for
groups as
you.
well. Well, it was a very unique situation that they appeared in, and we all depend upon them now. And yeah, anyway. So anyway. So you got to do these things up front,
Hmm.
and they cost a lot of money, and they. But you've also got to be smart about what you're doing as well.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I have one more I'm going to read to you, uh, and I will bring him back. Okay, this is Hoople's cat. He's got a good channel. He's sort of he calls himself a prepper, but he's very realistic about the ideas that he brings. He says, no way electric can deal with power outages. Even a solar system like mine in the winter won't be adequate. He's in Canada, northern Canada. Propane runs out, then you die. The wood stove provides heat and hot water, never runs out where we are. All three have a carbon footprint, but dying isn't an option. Drop $1 million and get a passive home. In all seriousness, we'd have been homeless for the last 3 winters if I had not insisted on a wood burning stove and finally rejected a pellet one. I can harvest my own fuel. So, talk about that passive home a little bit.
Right. So also just quickly too, the idea of solar power and wind power has been proposed as their primary non-fossil fuel energy systems going forward. And people are now grudgingly collecting the information. And the Department of Energy contact that I have showed me some information to show that, in one of the power grids that they look at, solar underperformed for 6 months of the year, all through winter, like badly, and wind underperformed for about 3 or 4 months of the year, generally in the summertime. And that happened 2 years in a row. And so when you're in winter and you're depending on electricity, but systems are solar and they underperform, even further south where it's actually not that cold and snowy, that's going to end in tears if we actually depend on electricity.
What would you like to tell my followers, our audience, from what we've discussed today?
Now, I tell young people it's the ability to think and problem solve and be flexible, right? And just because the people around them have told them that certain things are not possible, that could well be part of an outdated mode of thinking. That doesn't mean the ideas they do have are any good, but they have to be tested against reality. I do have hope for the future, right? But I want to round up a group of a small number of people, and I want to work with them,
Okay.
and we will build the next era.
Oh, I'm happy to hear it. And I don't think it's hopium. I think it's reality. I think it's realistic because this is the next step. I mean, even if the Arctic's melting, even if we see these horrible weather patterns, these things are going to happen. People like you are innovative and pushing for that change.
Clean as you go, clean as you go, clean as you go,